Okay. And I did mention this, but driver's license status still matters. An employer should verify whether employees have had their driving privileges suspended for reckless driving, DUI, whatever it is. If you have a suspended license, that is bad. You shouldn't be driving anything. You shouldn't be driving a company vehicle or an implement of husbandry under those conditions. Now, it's up to the employer if they allow somebody with a suspended driver's license to have uh, that employee drive only on private property, on the ranch itself, disking fields, driving the plant or whatever. Um, that can be okay, but you've got to be very careful. Are you liable if he runs over one of your farm workers in the field? Without it, the answer, an employer could risk interruptions in work, temporary loss of equipment, and even serious liability. So if that driver in the story earlier that was pulled over by Highway Patrol, if he had a driver's license and it was suspended, the Highway Patrol could have called to have that vehicle towed, the tractor towed. And if you think it's expensive to have your Honda Civic impounded and towed into the police yard and get it out of the police yard, it is expensive. Huge towing bill and the impound bill. Just think how expensive it is to do that with a tractor, or especially a tractor and a trailer with a disc, or God knows what's getting impounded. It could be mega bucks. And not only is it the cost of getting your equipment back, but it can take time, in some cases, lots of time to go through the red tape. And you need that equipment for your business. No tractor, no work. All right. Remember, driver's license is not required to operate implements of husbandry in the field on roads when traveling between fields, but it does not apply if the employee has had driving privileges suspended or revoked. If they've had driver's license privileges suspended or revoked, they can't be on any implement of husbandry at all on a public road. If an employee is stopped while driving farm equipment on a public road by a law enforcement officer who finds the employee's driving privileges have been suspended or revoked, the farm equipment will be seized. Cha-ching, cha-ching. Lots of money, big problems, big headaches, and you don't have your equipment. So seizure of the vehicle will interrupt the employer's work schedule, and that tractor or trailer or other implement can be held for up to 30 days before they have to give it back. In the event of an accident under these circumstances, the employer could face serious liability. So the tractor driver goes out there, even at no fault of the employee. If they had somebody just run into them and they were doing everything else right, the fact that they have a suspended or revoked license puts the company at fault. Even without a license, an employee could have suspended driving privileges, even if he or she has never had a driver's license. If an individual without a license is arrested for a violation, such as driving under the influence, the court can still suspend driving privileges. The DMV assigns an X number driver's license record. Won't go into the details, but I think my best friend got his first driving record when he was 13. Anyway, so it happens. And that followed him for years. A worker with suspended license can still operate equipment in the field, but is prohibited from driving on any public road. So that leads us to a whole nother area, cargo securement. And I'll tell you right now that some of the details here change, and I haven't gone back to look at where the exact numbers are, but with cargo securement, this is how you secure or tie down a load. And as everything else has an exception, it seems, in the law, cargo securement is no different. In agriculture, the cargo securement rules have tightened, but they're still not the same as if you're bringing a load of construction equipment to a job site. Agriculture is slightly different. California has maintained its own standards for agricultural haulers for cargo securement, but is facing a requirement to conform to federal standards. I'm not sure where that stands right now. I think there still are a couple of minor exceptions, minor differences in California, but it makes it difficult for companies and drivers if you've got rules that apply most states, but California is different. It's just harder to keep it straight. California agricultural haulers operate under an exemption from federal law, but even under federal law, ag isn't the same as other types of material secured to the back of a truck or trailer. Now, it does say current exemption expires April 30th, 2019. Due to the pandemic, I haven't even looked at what's happened in the post exemption period. Don't worry about those details. Each motor carrier hauling agricultural products must apply for an exemption. So it's not automatic. You have to file for an exemption for your company in order to have this be valid, and you need that exemption record with the vehicle. You need any information, call the California Highway Patrol Commercial Vehicle Section. And I think that number is current. If not, they are pretty easy to find. So in your application, you've got to say who the carrier is, the company, your carrier ID number, contact information, all of that. And each vehicle that is within that carrier's or company's operations must have the exemption paperwork in the vehicle. And then you submit reports based on that carrier exemption. Don't worry about the details, but essentially you're reporting how that vehicle has been used to transport agricultural products, the types of things, the amount and the miles, et cetera, all of that you're reporting monthly to the Highway Patrol. What if there's an accident? Cargo falls off the vehicle, you must immediately notify the Highway Patrol, and then within 72 hours, there's some other paperwork that you have to do. I knew one guy, he used it as an excuse to go visit family in Mexico and get a new job when he came back. He had cargo fall off his strawberry hauling truck. He left the strawberries in the middle of the road, the truck, and just left the country. That was a bad day for us, but whatever. It happens. You're supposed to report things. You're supposed to do your job. Now, there are minimum performance criteria for cargo securement. Now, you're using some kind of rope, strap, tie down, tarp, etc. There's a lot of different things you can use depending on the situation. But the performance criteria go into G forces or gravity forces. So for example, if I've got something that weighs 1,000 pounds and I need to put it secured on the back trailer, the deceleration force must be 0.8 or 80% of that, or 800 pounds of force. So whatever device I'm using to secure that, when I slam on the brakes and that 1,000 pounds of cargo pushing forward must be able to exert up to 800 pounds of that 1,000 pounds in a forward direction with a safe securement method. The rearward direction, so when you're accelerating or going up a hill, cargo might be trying to move backward off the trailer backwards. That's rearward direction. And it needs to be able to hold half the load. So for every 1,000 pounds of load, that securement needs to be suitable, rated to at least 500 pounds for every 1,000 pounds of load it's securing. And lateral direction, side to side, you're going around corners. It also needs to be half the load, assuming half the full force of the weight of the load could be going left or right against the securement devices. And it's not just the ropes or straps, it's also the anchor points, etc. Performance criteria for devices to prevent vertical movement of loads that are not contained within the structure. So there must be a downward force at least equivalent to 20% the weight of the article of cargo. So you've got, if you've got 1,000 pounds of stuff I'm trying to secure, I need a 200-pound force pushing down to keep it from bouncing up or somehow coming loose off of the vehicle. If there's other loose things, I also need to have some sort of a netting or tarp to prevent things from blowing off with the wind. That's not on this particular slide, but that is an important additional criteria. Prohibition on exceeding working load limits. Cargo securement devices and systems must be designed, installed, and maintained to ensure that the maximum forces acting on the devices or systems do not exceed the working load limit for the device. So the devices are rated. There are clamps, there are hooks, there are anchor points, there are webbing or strapping, there's ropes, and all of them come with some sort of rating. And there should be some sort of method for inspecting and determining when that rating is no longer being met. Ropes begin to fray, webbing or flat strapping also begins to fray and get some problems with the integrity of the threads in that webbing. Clamps and cam devices get old, rusty, or oxidized in some other way. If it's not iron, it doesn't rust, but it still could oxidize. I've seen some straps that just blow my mind. Some of the straps I've seen look like they came out of the early 70s and they're frayed all over the place. It looks like a bad hair day. That's not okay. Replace those things. Equivalent means of securement: cargo that is immobilized or made to not move, or secured in accordance with the applicable requirements, is considered as meeting the performance criteria of this section. So essentially that means that as it's defined within the California law, if you have something that meets the same safety standards of securement, but it doesn't follow the exact same methods, that's okay. You can have alternative ways of securing things as long as you can demonstrate that it meets the safety requirements. Commercial Vehicle Registration Act. A commercial vehicle is any motor vehicle over 10,000 gross vehicle weight. With some of these big vehicles that we have now, some of the large trucks, Hummers, and other recreational vehicles, a lot of things that are being purchased by homeowners falls within this commercial gross vehicle weight. There is an exception for the larger pickups, at least the medium-sized pickups, that 11,500 gross vehicle weight or less. So you have to find out for sure as you're registering a vehicle. Most people don't have to worry about a personal vehicle because the dealership, the DMV, handles that, whether or not you're commercial or not. But there will have to be some exceptions in the law to handle some of the large personal vehicles that are not commercial. Not going to worry about the details of the Vehicle Registration Act. The bottom line is you have to register your vehicles if they're going on the road. The only exception for registration is if they're completely off-road vehicles of husbandry or implements of husbandry like tractors. Now there could be engine registration for air quality. That's different. Vehicle registration, we're talking about driving the vehicle over public roadways and highways. Registering engines for air pollution standard controls. There is no exception that, oh, it's a tractor, it's off-road only. No, you must comply. That's a different area we'll talk about later this semester. But I'm not going to go through the details here. I'm not going to ask you on a test about, $110 million annually. Those details change, and I don't care that you memorize some statistical numbers. Yeah, you can essentially just read through this on your own. Just understand what I said about vehicles must be registered if they're going to be used on roadways over 25 miles an hour, and they're not just used on the farm. They're now for public highway and public roadway transportation. They need to be registered. And that's it. That is it for vehicle rules. Many of you may have not known about how that process worked and the fact that tractors have different rules than the rest of us, but it doesn't mean they don't have rules. Again, just because agriculture has a lot of exemptions, it doesn't mean they're exempt from laws. They're just exempt from the same laws. They have different rules because they are different. So that is it for this lecture.